Bill 929 is dealing with tolling hours, and if you want to go ahead and present that, but we're going to bring Senator Black up too after you present and
Thank
try
you,
to
Mr.
figure out what you're trying to get to.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an issue, members of the committee. I-66 Inside the Beltway is a limited access highway, the only one that I know of in the nation. Mr. Chairman, in your area, it would be much like having I-81 from Abingdon to Bristol. It's about this close to the same length that you can't drive on unless you have more than one people in your car. The changes this year, VDOT excluded an additional 3 hours of a family's ability to get to work. 3 hours. So the pre-existing timeframes were 6:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. Those were previously excluded. Then in the afternoon, the reverse going out back home, it was 4 to 6:30. VDOT has now adjusted those hours from 5:30 a.m. to 9:30, where you can no longer drive on that interstate highway in the morning, and in the afternoon from 3 to 7 p.m. So now families have 3 hours less opportunity if they can't, because people commute to different areas. There's some areas that, like to the Pentagon and other areas, Boston, have opportunities to pick up riders, but others don't. So, Mr. Chairman, it'd be like every morning, families that commute from Abington to Bristow would have to take Old Jonesboro Road and other areas to circuitously get around to get to work. And families in my area and many other folks' areas have adjusted their pattern to the previous hours. So they'd leave for work a little early in the morning. That way they could get out at work a little bit earlier to extend that rush hour and allow the flexibility to get home to the kids to get stuff done. Now all those opportunities are blocked out. So you either have to pay, which right now, last week, for a segment of that road, Mr. Chairman, it'd be like paying $46 to get from Abington to Bristow. That's what's going on. For different time segments and time windows, $46.75 was the charges last week. It's not going to go away. In fact, there's construction that needs to occur because there's expansion of the road from the Beltway at 495 into Boston. So guess what? Construction barriers are about to go up. Do you think that's going to exacerbate the prices? You bet they are. Not only that, but we have the outside the Beltway construction that needs to occur. The core problem isn't necessarily the concept of the project itself. We can debate tolling and paying for infrastructure. That ship sailed, unfortunately, long ago. But I think the issues that in this circumstance are we have not built the parking lots outside the Beltway to give families a reasonable place to park, a reasonable place to get on a bus, and then to be able to drive through that segment of I-66. That's a real problem. We have put the cart before the horse in this instance, and this is why this bill sets out to return the hours to what families were used to, trying to get to and from work, until the project is complete, until those parking lots and that infrastructure is in place to give folks a viable solution to pick up slugs, pick up riders, to take advantage of means to get into work without just a single occupant vehicle. I think everyone understand that corridor is so full. We have to look at multimodal. We have to look at buses. But frankly, right now, the infrastructure just isn't in place. There's no other option. And that's what's frustrating families. It's time to change and roll this back until which time that the project is mature enough to deal with the issues that are at hand. And that is the bill. That's sort of the core of the issue, okay. Mr. Chairman.
All right, do you have anybody here to speak in favor of your bill?
There's about 100,000 that are busy commuting to and from.
Well, I get that. There's about 200,000 my way on bills that they'd like to speak to. But
yeah.
We can't get them in here. If not, I would like to ask Senator Black to come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I will speak on behalf of my colleague's bill, and mine is very similar. We face similar problems. We've got just astronomical tolls. Our tolls run, in some cases, $47 for a one-way toll. It's just like nothing else in the country. And the problem is that we really need additional roadway inside the Beltway, and this thing has been done sort of backwards. And what my bill does is basically it instructs VDOT to return to the previous tolling period, the hours that they had before, just as my colleague here proposed. That's one thing. Also, it says that where the tolls on an individual exceed $200 a month, that excess should be refunded to them through the Easy Pass system. And then the third thing it does is it activates tolling of reverse commutes, because the way that the commutes are set up is people coming from the west going east, they get tolled in the morning during rush hour, they get tolled in the evening during rush hour. People on the inside of the Beltway, since they're going against the traffic, they pay very little. So those are the three things that it does. And I have the same 100,000 people behind me. I think I see a couple hundred of them right here. And so anyway, that's the gist of it. There's just tremendous amount of frustration over these tremendous tolls.
I understand. And I think there's several amendments to your bill.
Yes, I could make those. At first, I would ask that we delete lines 67 through.
Let me let council report those amendments, and then I'll entertain a motion on the amendments.
The council doesn't have this particular one first. Oh, okay, you do have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's 3 amendments total. On line 61, after of the strike eastbound widening project on and insert widening of a 4-mile segment of eastbound. On line 61, after 66, strike inside the Capitol Beltway, insert from the Dulles Connector Road to Fairfax Drive. And on line 67, strike all of lines 67 through 89, which is essentially removing the last 2 enactments from the bill.
All right, is there a motion on those amendments? It's been moved and seconded that we adopt those amendments. All in favor say aye. All opposed? All right. The bill's before us as amended. Now, I realize that there's a lot, and I'm glad you brought Abington to Bristol, because there was some, when VDOT enters into these contracts with the construction companies, they have certain times that they want to shut an interstate down, and what little bit of construction we do have, it was on 81 and between Abington and Bristol, and there was a lot of complaints about that. But because those are contractual issues that VDOT enters into with the companies that are doing these, they're partnering with the PB3s or whatever, I think that's something that concerns me about both these bills, is that, these are contractual issues that, according to the Constitution, that we try not to get into the middle of if we are going to change the way that construction process is done. I realize you're utilizing and concerned about the tolls that are being charged when they come back through, but I still think that there's some issues there constitutionally about those contracts.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Peake.
Mr. Chairman, just
McPike, I'm sorry.
We'll get there,
Do it
Mr.
again.
Chairman.
Yeah.
Couple of years, we'll get there.
You're still young.
Thank you, sir. I think one of the keys, though, is to understand there's 2 different components. Inside the Beltway, then the tolling hours are right now controlled by us, by the Virginia State Department of Transportation. The outside of the Beltway project is executed and is continuing and proceeding. These are 2 independent segments. The point of these bills is that they are a continuous project, and we want the infrastructure completed outside the Beltway, because that's where the parking capacity, that's where all the cars are coming from. And so that's the main point. If we have control and then the ability to change these hours as the state of Virginia, as the Commonwealth. So that should not impact the outside of the Beltway, because they're starting their design, their process and projects and looking at the parking lots design. There's been lots of public hearing on when and where they're going to do those. So the point of this is execute the project, get it moving forward, then you can look at the full system when it's in place. And that's really the key point. And so really, outside the Beltway is a separate contract. This is something inside the Beltway that we control today.
Right. Senator Cosgrove.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, first off, if it's appropriate, I'd make a motion to roll Senate Bill 929 into Senate Bill 898.
All right, there's a motion and a second that we roll Senate Bill 929 into Senate Bill 898. All in favor, vote aye on electronic voting board.
Thirteen ayes, 0 nays.
All right,
Mr. Chairman,
those are rolled together. Senator Cosgrove.
I'd ask either of our two senators, these hot lanes we're talking about, these were built under a public-private partnership, is that correct?
One segment.
One second, okay. I guess I would echo the chairman's concern about the infringement on existing contracts with this bill. Is there a conflict with what we have contracted and what these bills are trying to do?
Mr. Chairman, I would not say so. I would let VDOT speak to any of that. There is a sequence of it, but I don't think this would impede the sequence of it all, because it's about the hours of exclusion to these families that have lost 3 hours of the ability to get to work and back to their families.
Mr. Chairman, before we hear from VDOT, I would say that you mentioned Senator Carrico's area, but, egregiously neglected my area. I would say that the HOV lanes in Hampton Roads have just been changed from 2 hours of HOV to 4 hours of now hot NHOV lanes. And these were not public-private partnerships. These were basically built with federal funding and state funding. So, and it's happened here before you, and that money isn't earmarked for any particular project. At the same time, when the Elizabeth River Crossings project was done, people were paying tolls on the downtown tunnel and the midtown tunnel in Norfolk for projects that had yet to be completed. The money was actually going towards those projects that were being done, but they were still paying while it was being completed. And I guess I don't see why Hampton Roads should be treated differently than Northern Virginia. And I know, get your own bill, but at the same time, I'm going to have a hard time supporting this.
All right,
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Senator McPike.
if I could just add to that, because that's one of the problems, is we're building a transportation network that involves different language, different rules for different roads. And that's a big problem. And I agree, for Hampton Roads as well, and we need to talk about that discussion. We're trying to write this for this area. And it's important that we have a common context as we drive our network of highways. It's challenging to people that you got different segments and different rules across our entire network. I think it's bad public policy.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience that that would briefly like to stand up and speak to the bill in favor? All right. Opposition.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Nick Donahue. I serve as Deputy Secretary of Transportation. There are a few points. I am here to speak in opposition to the bill. The administration does oppose both provisions here. I'd like to just make a few points here to provide some additional context on the project that Senator McPike and Senator Black talked about. First is I-66 is a project that we have litigated and debated in front of the Assembly previously. Some of you may remember in 2016, we debated this topic extensively. A compromise was reached between the McAuliffe administration and the Assembly, and I want to stress, compromise doesn't mean 100 delegates and 40 senators support. It means 51 delegates and 21 senators support, but we did reach a compromise in 2016. The project that has been implemented is a project that is in line with that compromise that was implemented. The project is a result of years of planning. It was a study that started under the McDonnell administration and then was vetted for 3 years in the public with discourse, and many modifications were made. I would also note, Mr. Chairman, we started tolling on December 4th. It is not even February yet. We have not had 2 full months of operation of this facility, and I would encourage this body to allow the department to continue to implement this project as it was studied, planned, and analyzed for years, as we're only 2 months into the implementation. I want to say that I-66 is also working much better than it used to. So prior to tolling, as Senator McPike noted, I-66 has HOV restrictions that were in place. And what used to happen is that right before 6:30, so many drivers would try and get on the road that instead of being free flow when it became HOV, the average travel speeds were around 25 at 6:30 in the morning when the road became HOV. HOV roads under federal law are supposed to travel at 45 miles per hour. I-66 did not do that. In fact, it was only over 45 miles per hour for about 10% of the HOV time period there. Since we've implemented tolling, I-66 is operating above 45 miles per hour the vast majority of the time. There are still some instances where the speeds have fallen below that, but it's a minority, not a majority of the time. This has been accomplished all while the parallel routes have not seen increases in travel times. So there's 4 key parallel routes to this roadway: Route 50, Route 29, Route 7, the George Washington Parkway. The travel times on those roadways, while I-66 has gotten dramatically better, have stayed essentially the same. And some have improved, but I don't know if it's going to stay that way over time. So I want to say they've essentially stayed the same. I do want to note there is a relationship to this project and I-66 outside the Beltway. When the Commonwealth undertook its traffic and revenue studies for I-66 outside the Beltway, those studies did show that if inside the Beltway was also converted to express lanes, there would be greater revenue potential and the Commonwealth could receive a better deal on outside the Beltway. And so there is a provision in the outside the Beltway public-private partnership that would make it a compensation event if these hours are changed or there's other modifications to the tolling operations. I want to stress, I'm a public employee. I cannot tell you what our private partner will do. I cannot tell you if they'll be successful if they choose to take certain options. What I can state is they have the right legally to do so moving forward. Senator McPike and Senator Black both also talked about the extended hours and the impact that that's having on commuters in that area. First, I want to note that the high tolls that were referenced in the discourse do not happen during the extended hours. There's no $40 toll at 6 in the morning. The $40 toll is at 8:30. When if you're a single driver before December of last year, you couldn't legally drive on the road for the most part. The tolls in the extended hours tend to be around $3 to $4. But I would also say the parallel routes provide equal travel times to the commuters that travel at 6 a.m. compared to what 66 used to do before tolling, because 66 was so congested during those time periods. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I would just note the average round-trip toll through January 18th has been $11.15. That's going in both ways. Now, that's not a full trip. That's the average toll someone paid. Many users don't go the full length. And so that is significantly less than the estimated $17 average round trip that was publicized during 2015 and became a significant campaign issue in Northern Virginia, for those of you who recall that discussion. I would also note that providing refunds when drivers get to a certain level of payment is just going to create another group of people who are inelastic demand, if you will, just like carpoolers, and don't have to pay the toll, which means the toll goes up for everyone else because there's less space available for toll payers. Similarly, it's our belief that shortening hours may hinder our ability to have the roadway function because the road just gets so congested before those HOV hours that we're worried if that happens again, will we be able to recover basically a very congested interstate in a short period of time. And I also think that would push more of those solo drivers looking for a fast trip into a shorter window, similarly increasing the tolls. In closing, Mr. Chairman, the administration does want to keep working on this issue. We need to look at it. Some of the points Senator McPike made about parking lots, more transit options, and other things, and we are in violent agreement with the senator on that issue. We are committed to reviewing the toll algorithm to understand if there are ways that we can get more cars on that road without getting to a point of congestion. These are all things that we do want to look at, but we need time. We're not even 2 months in, as I noted at the very beginning of this discussion, and so we'd like some time to review this. We're committed to continuing to work on this issue administratively. And again, I think some of the issues the senator raised are real issues that we do want to look at and try and work with the members in that area on. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Senator Chase. You may have a question. Do you question or speak?
Yes, I do have
Okay.
a question. Thank you. We've heard a lot today about concerns that constituents have brought to our senators, bipartisan. I mean, this is definitely an issue, and I understand contract law. I understand that you have a contract that's a private public partnership. But as a legislator, whenever you get that many constituents calling you upset, we need to work and figure out a viable solution. I understand this has only been going on, the testing started in December, but still, it's enough time to realize there's a problem that needs to be addressed. So I would like to know what steps you're going to put in place to listen to the constituents and make sure this is taken care of so it doesn't come back in the General Assembly next year.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Chase, I really appreciate your points, and I do agree that when we hear this level of discourse from the public, the government needs to pay attention. And I guess what I want to make very clear is we are paying attention. We have published day-by-day results on traffic for the first month there. What we're going to be doing over the next few weeks is reviewing the tolling algorithm. Please don't ask me to explain it because I will just say something inaccurate. But we have some very smart people who understand how that works. And what we're going to be asking them to do is review that. I think we've heard some fair points raised by Senator Vola has raised this with me as of others saying, do we need to look at 55 miles per hour? Can we lower that down to 50 or 47 or some other amount that might allow more people to use that and also at a lower rate there? And I think that's something we are very interested in doing. We needed time for the algorithm to work so that we could understand the consequences, both intended and unintended, of making modifications to that concept. And so we are going to have folks looking at that. We are committed to doing that review. And if we find modifications that can be made that help address this concern or provide a better outcome for folks, we will implement those concerns moving forward. And I do know that people don't like tolls. I understand that. I grew up in the Richmond region. I used to pay the Poway Parkway toll to go to high school. It was not fun. I understand the dislike there.
Sir, how much were your tolls when you were paying those tolls?
That's a very good question. Mr. Chairman, Senator Chase, that's a very good question. The Poway Parkway is a fixed toll that applies to all users, whereas the tolls on I-66 are dynamic tolls that allow people to use a road that they previously could not drive in by themselves. So there is a pretty big difference between those toll rates.
Now, do you think the average house, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, do you think the average family can afford $50 tolls each way? Is that reasonable?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Chase, the intent of the dynamic tolling is not a toll that someone would pay every day. Again, this is a new choice to drivers. On the 95 express lanes, where we did also extend the hours and have dynamic tolling in place, we find 83% of the users use the road 5 or less times a month. So this is not something people are intended or that we intend for someone to do excuse me, Mr. Chairman, every day. This is a choice that is there when there's unique circumstances that might warrant paying a toll to move forward in that faster time period there. So the other thing, again, is just remember, during these times where the tolls that were cited by Senator McPike, you could not legally use the road a year ago. So this is a choice that is being provided to folks. That being said, Senator Chase, I hear your point about those toll rates. I had a lot of phone calls on December 4th, 5th, and 6th when I had the flu. I am very much aware of the situation. The Secretary is aware of the situation. We are reviewing this. We're committed to reviewing it. And so I can give you that commitment because that's where we are. I understand the issues. We want to look at getting parking out there. We want to look at getting more buses out there. I agree with Senator McPike on that issue.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, just one follow-up statement, if you don't mind. I'm very concerned about this issue from the point of an everyday average family trying to make a living who wants to spend more time with their family. This is an issue, and I appreciate the legislators bringing this forward. I appreciate that you're taking this seriously. I will promise you if this comes up before the General Assembly next year, I will support it full-heartedly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Marsden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry I had to step away to a hearing in courts. Are we moving more people through through that corridor, the 29-211, Route 50, I-66 corridor? Are we getting more efficient use out of those lanes right now?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Marsden, we are certainly getting faster travel speeds through those corridors. We're still collecting volume data. Some of those roads are controlled by local governments, and we're not able to. It takes a little bit more time to get that information. And
tolls were projected to be about $17 in their round trip, the average toll, and we're now in the $11 range?
That is correct, sir.
So VDOT's goals going into this are being met. At this point in time, I understand we still need a lot of data to be gathered, but for right now, your goals are being met.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Marsden, I would say the project is working.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I think it is way too soon to question VDOT's judgment here. The preliminary signs are good. I understand the problem that my friends from Loudoun County have with, people coming in and having to use first to go on the Greenway and then to get, hit on 66. I understand the problems. Hopefully soon the bridges will be completed over Route 7 and Route 7 will start to improve. But right now I think we need to stay the course and back VDOT's judgment on this.
Senator Favola.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have had multiple conversations with VDOT, and one of the more troubling things in my mind was the widening of the hours, expanding the hours both heading east and heading west. And so now individuals really don't have an opportunity to sort of wait out the high toll period. In the past, they could just sort of, arrange their work schedule or telecommute in a way where they could get on 66 at a time where they didn't have to pay such high tolls. We have removed that option by having such a wide time frame. And we did mention this to you in December, and I appreciate the fact that you need to keep studying this and you want good data, but to be honest, I'd rather have you study it at lower than 55 miles an hour, which would reduce the dynamic tolling because cars would be going slower, so the tolls would not be as high. And I want you to study it with going back to the same band of rush hour periods that we had prior. So I mean, based on the constituency I represent, I have to vote for this. I wish we had done more administratively. There isn't a need for this bill if VDOT had, and with all due respect, I think you are a wonderful civil servant and do your job very well, but VDOT should have figured out some of these barriers prior to lawmakers being asked by their constituents to put in this bill. You clearly could fix this without a bill, but here we are with a bill.
All right. Senator Cosgrove.
Yes, Senator Wexton would like to speak.
All right. Senator Wexton.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would associate myself with the remarks of the senator from Arlington and forgive me because I wasn't here for all this argument. I was another committee, but I would again say you guys have no idea what we're going through in Loudoun County. And I have constituents who have planned their entire commute, their entire where they purchased a house, the purchasing of a hybrid vehicle for the specific reason that they would be able to take this stretch of roadway. And the way that VDOT rolled it out and the methodology used has been really a disaster for a lot of my constituents. And we don't have the excuse of saying, well, this is a concessionaire or this is some result of a public-private partnership that we got, a bad deal on. This is on VDOT. And I support the legislation that was brought by my colleagues, and I appreciate everything they're trying to do, and I plan to vote in favor of the bill.
Senator Cosgrove.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I need to offer Nick an apology. I've seen him several times in the hall. I used to serve with a pilot named Joe Donahue. I called you Joe a couple of times, and it just dawned on me, he's not the pilot, man. So anyway, I apologize.
You don't want me flying a plane, sir.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, this bill, while well-intentioned, I think, as Mr. Donahue said, this whole thing's only been in use for 2 months. And I think it really has to have a little time to iron that out. Again, these hot lanes were not meant, for just absolute traffic, relief. They are a congestion-priced toll, and I think we need to try to let VDOT work this out. And that being said, Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully move that we PBI Senate Bill 898.
Second.
It's been a motion and a second that we PBI Senate Bill 898. All in favor of PBI, vote aye. All right, there's a substitute motion. There's a motion and a second that we report Senate Bill 988, which is now the primary motion. All in favor of reporting Senate Bill 998, I'm sorry.
898.
Yeah. If this, just for correction on your motion, if we report, it has to go to finance. So report and refer to finance. All right. All in favor of reporting and referring to finance, vote aye on electronic voting board.
6 ayes, 7 nays.
Bill fails to report, 7-6. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, and I appreciate the position of the administration. Just wanted to let you know we have a tremendous problem there.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, our families don't have time to wait on this issue. So the longer we wait, the longer every month it impacts families.
Thank you. Senator